For 49
alive,
mornings,
sir.
Hawthorne Pruitt
She gave me
knelt at the
this.
same gravestone and pressed his hands to the granite. His daughter. Gone. He had no reason to believe anything different. Until the morning, a boy in marker-covered sneakers planted his feet on the gravel path behind him and held out a laminated school photo. Your daughter's alive, sir. She gave me this. That boy was 11 years old. He'd walked 2.3 miles in the dark every night for 3 weeks. 3 adults had called him a liar and walked away. Hawthorne Pruitt did not walk away. This is Wade, Nell, and Hawthorne's story. And the ending will prove that the person society teaches you to fear is sometimes the only one brave enough to answer when a child whispers for help. If you believe every child deserves someone who answers, subscribe and tell me what city you're watching from in the comments. Because what happened at that cemetery gate is only the beginning. Let's go back to where it started. That November morning at the cemetery gate. Your daughter's alive, sir. She gave me this. Those were the 8 words Wade had rehearsed 40 times in his head during the 38-foot walk from the cemetery gate to the gravestone where Hawthorne Pruitt knelt in the cold. 8 words that should have been impossible. 8 words spoken by a boy whose voice didn't shake, even though his right hand, the one holding the laminated school photo in his hoodie pocket, was trembling so hard he had to press it against his ribs to keep it still. Hawthorne didn't stand. Not yet. He turned his head slowly, the kind of controlled movement a man learns when his body wants to move very fast, but his mind knows better. His eyes went to Wade's face. Dark eyes, holding eye contact longer than most adults expected from a boy who'd been labeled a behavioral problem in 3 separate incident reports. Then Hawthorne's gaze dropped to Wade's right hand, still hidden in the hoodie pocket. Then back to Wade's face. He held out his palm. Open, flat, wordless. Wade pulled the photo from his pocket and placed it in Hawthorne's hand like he was handing over something fragile enough to shatter. The cemetery went quiet. No wind. No distant traffic. Just the sound of Hawthorne Pruitt staring at a September school picture of his daughter in a yellow church dress, gap-toothed smile, one braid slightly shorter than the other because Nell always pulled the left one while she was thinking. 7 seconds. That's how long Hawthorne looked at the photo before he turned it over. Purple crayon letters. Uneven. Spelled in a child's handwriting. Daddy's girl. Nell had copied those words from what Hawthorne called her every single morning. No one outside their family would know she'd written it herself. No one except the person she'd given this photo to. No one except someone who'd sat with her long enough to hear her say, "Find my daddy. He has wings on his back. Show him this. He'll know it's really me." Hawthorne's hand began to shake. Where is she? Not a question. A command. His voice was low, steady, the kind of control that comes from 8 years in the Marine Corps and 11 years wearing a Hell's Angels patch and 49 days of believing his daughter was 6 feet under the dirt he'd been kneeling on every morning since October 9th. Take me there now. Wade opened his mouth, closed it. This was the moment. The moment when adults either believed him or walked away. He'd had this moment 3 times before. The group home supervisor who'd written, "Overactive imagination" in the log without looking up. The police officer who'd run Wade's name, seen the fabricator flag in the system, and driven off. The 3 Rotary Club members on the courthouse steps who'd looked at Wade's marker-covered sneakers and group home wristband and redirected him back to Mill Creek Road like a lost package that needed returning to storage. But Hawthorne Pruitt wasn't walking away. He was standing, slowly, fully, turning to face Wade completely. And then he was kneeling, all the way down to eye level on the gravel path. His right hand, the one with Nell tattooed in clean script on the inside of his wrist, rested open on his knee. "I'm listening," Hawthorne said. "Every word. Start from the beginning." Wade planted his feet. The same subconscious stance he'd learned at the group home. Plant your feet before speaking to an adult so they can't walk away from you mid-sentence. "Sir, she's in the old cotton warehouse on Route 9 East. The abandoned Pruitt Agricultural Building. She's been there 3 weeks. I've been bringing her food." Hawthorne's jaw tightened. The muscle along the left side of his face jumped once. 3 weeks. 21 days, Wade corrected. His voice was even, careful. The voice of a child who'd learned that tone mattered more than words when adults weren't listening. "I found her during the thunderstorm on November 6th. I go through the back fence at the group home when the nights get loud. I was sheltering in the warehouse. She was in the northeast subroom behind the old gin machinery, wrapped in burlap sacking. She had a fever. She was alone." Alone. Hawthorne repeated the word like he was testing it, seeing if it would crack. "For 21 days, my daughter has been alone in a warehouse." "No, sir." Wade's hands were in his pockets now, both of them, because if he didn't keep them there, they'd start shaking, and he needed Hawthorne to see him as someone competent, someone who'd kept Nell alive, not some scared kid who couldn't handle this. "She hasn't been alone. I've been there, every night. I bring her crackers, water bottles, anything I can carry. I cut burlap strips for her feet because her shoes came off in the accident. I sit with her so she's not scared." Something shifted in Hawthorne's face. Not softening. The man looked like he was carved from stone and fury. But a shift. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone seeing another person clearly for the first time. "You're 11 years old," Hawthorne said. "Yes, sir." "And you've been walking to that warehouse, at night, alone?" "Yes, sir." "Because no one else believed you." Wade's throat tightened. He swallowed. Nodded. Hawthorne was quiet for 3 seconds, the kind of quiet that felt heavier than yelling. Then, "What's your name, son?" "Wade Hollis." "Wade." Hawthorne said it like he was memorizing it. "I need you to tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. Don't worry about sounding crazy. I'm past the point of caring what sounds crazy. Just tell me what you know." Wade took a breath. This was the part that made people's faces change, the part where they started looking for reasons not to believe him. "Her wrist is broken," Wade said. "Her left wrist, from the accident. It never got treated. It's been 49 days and it's healing wrong. I can see it. The bone is thicker where it broke and she can't close that hand all the way anymore." Hawthorne's eyes closed. Opened. "She coughs all night," Wade continued. "It's getting worse. It used to be little coughs, but now it's like she can't stop. And she's so pale, sir. She looks gray. Her lips are all cracked and split, and she's wearing the same dress from the accident. The yellow and white striped one. It's torn at the shoulder and it's dirty, and she's been wearing it for 49 days straight." Jesus Christ. Hawthorne's voice cracked on the second word. "She has no shoes," Wade said. "They came off in the accident. I gave her my socks, but they're too big. That's why I cut the burlap strips, to wrap her feet." Hawthorne stood abruptly, turned away, pressed both hands to the back of his neck, and stood there for 5 seconds, breathing hard through his nose. When he turned back around, his eyes were red. How much does she weigh? Hawthorne said. Not a question. A demand. I don't know exactly, but she's small. Too small. I can see her ribs through the dress. Is she eating what you bring? Yes, sir, everything. But it's not enough. I only have... Wade stopped. This was the part he hated. The part that made him feel like he was failing. I only have $1.40. I get it from returning bottles for deposit. I buy crackers and water. That's all I can carry anyway. Hawthorne stared at Wade for a long time. Then he did something Wade didn't expect. He took off his Hell's Angels leather vest, the one with every patch and 11 years of road on it, and settled it over Wade's shoulders. It reached Wade's knees. The leather was warm. It smelled like motor oil and distance. You've been keeping my daughter alive for 3 weeks with $1.40 and burlap scraps, Hawthorne said quietly, while I've been kneeling at an empty grave. It's not empty, sir. There's someone in it. Just not Nell. Hawthorne went very still. What did you just say? Wade's heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. This was it. The part that sounded too big to be real. The part that had made the police officer get back in his car. But Hawthorne was still here. Still listening. Still kneeling at Wade's eye level, like what Wade had to say actually mattered. 14 nights ago, Wade said, speaking faster now because if he slowed down he might lose his nerve. I was outside the warehouse. I'd just brought Nell some crackers and I was leaving. It was 11:20 at night, and I heard a voice. Whose voice? I didn't see him. He was inside the warehouse entry corridor. I was pressed against the east wall. There's a gap in the corrugated siding near the loading door frame. I could hear him through it. He was on a phone call. I heard everything he said. What did he say? Hawthorne's voice had gone flat. The kind of flat that meant he was holding something back with both hands. Wade recited it. Word for word. Exactly the way he'd whispered it to himself walking back to the group home that night, over and over in the dark until it was locked in permanent. He said, "The paperwork's filed. 60 days from the accident date. That certificate is uncontestable under state statute." Then he paused. Someone was talking on the other end. Then he said, "She stays where she is until the 19th. After that, it doesn't matter." Another pause. Then, "The annuity triggers at $247,800 the moment the certificate locks. That was always the arrangement." Pause again. Then, "The father thinks she's in the ground on Sycamore Road. He's not looking. Men like that fall apart. They don't investigate." And then the last thing he said before he hung up. "Same as the old woman in Natchez. Clean paperwork, clean exit. Nobody looks twice at a funeral home." Hawthorne didn't move, didn't blink. For 7 full seconds, he was completely motionless. Then, very quietly, "A funeral home." "Yes, sir. I looked it up at the library. There's only one funeral home in Harlan Crossing. Voss Family Funeral Services on Commerce Avenue. The man who filed your daughter's death certificate." Randall Voss. Hawthorne said the name like he was biting down on glass. "I don't know his first name, sir, but the certificate, I saw it posted at the courthouse. Filed October 10th, 31 hours after the accident. The law says it's supposed to take 72 hours minimum for accident fatalities involving minors. He filed it in 31 hours. You looked that up?" "Yes, sir. At the library. I had to know if it was real, if what I heard was real." Hawthorne stood, pulled his phone from his pocket. His hands were steady, but his voice, when he spoke into the phone, had an edge that made Wade take an unconscious step back. Pitchfork. It's Tombstone. I need every brother within 100 miles at my location in 1 hour. Full chapter. This isn't a request. I'll explain when you get here. Pause. Harlan Crossing Municipal Cemetery, Sycamore Road, and Pitchfork. Another pause. Bring chainsaw. We're going to need someone who knows probate law. He hung up. Looked at Wade. You're coming with me, Hawthorne said. You're going to tell this story one more time to people who will believe you, and then you're going to take us to that warehouse. And Wade, yes, sir, you did the right thing. Every time you went to an adult, and they didn't listen, you did the right thing. You kept going. That ends today. I've got her from here, son, and I've got you. Knox Pitchfork Delano arrived first. 57 years old, gray beard braided, eyes that had seen 3 decades of club politics and never once looked away from something ugly. Every cop in Harlan County knew his name and his rules. Hell's Angels didn't start trouble, but they sure as hell finished it. He killed his engine, swung off his bike, and walked straight to Hawthorne. Talk to me. Hawthorne didn't waste time. My daughter, Nell, she's alive. Pitchfork's expression didn't change. Didn't question, just, location? Pruitt Agricultural Warehouse, Route 9 East. How do you know? Hawthorne gestured to Wade. This boy's been keeping her alive for 3 weeks while the man who filed her death certificate waits for an insurance payout to lock in. Pitchfork looked at Wade, at the Hell's Angels vest draped over a child who weighed maybe 70 pounds, at the marker-covered sneakers and the way Wade was standing, feet planted, chin up, ready to tell this story as many times as it took. How much time do we have? Pitchfork said. 11 days, Hawthorne answered. Before the death certificate becomes uncontestable. Before $247,800 transfers to the executor. Who's the executor? Randall Voss, funeral director. Pitchfork pulled his phone. Dialed. Didn't wait for a greeting. Chainsaw, Pitchfork, I need you at the cemetery, now. Bring your legal kit. Pause. Probate fraud, child endangerment, possible homicide. He hung up. Looked at Hawthorne. We're in. What's the play? We get her out. Then we bury him. With evidence or with dirt? Both. Pitchfork almost smiled. Good answer. By the time the sun hit 9 a.m., there were 63 motorcycles in that parking lot. Mississippi chapter in full force. Brothers ranging from 28 years old to 74, from former cops to combat medics to a man who'd spent 19 years as a middle school principal before retiring and realizing he missed protecting kids more than he missed having weekends off. Hawthorne stood in front of them, Wade at his side, and told the story from the beginning. The accident on Route 9, the death certificate filed in 31 hours, the funeral he'd watched, knowing his daughter was supposed to be in that casket, the 49 mornings at the grave, and then the boy with marker-covered sneakers who'd approached him with a laminated school photo and 8 impossible words. When he finished, the lot was silent. Not the kind of silence that meant people didn't believe him, the kind that meant they believed him completely and were already calculating what needed to happen next. We'll need evidence that holds in court, said a brother named Chainsaw, 52 years old, former Mississippi State Police detective, 19 years on the force before a pension and a leather vest called him to different work. Right now we've got a child's testimony and an overheard phone call. We need documents, bank records, communication logs, proof of executorship appointment, the annuity paperwork. And we need Nell, added Sandstone, 69, Army combat medic from 72 to 79. His hands had set broken bones in field hospitals and carried wounded men through rice paddies. He'd delivered 3 babies in the back of a pickup truck during a tornado in 1987. If anyone could assess what 49 days of untreated fracture and warehouse cold had done to an 8-year-old, it was him. Medical evaluation, documented injuries, photographic evidence. "And we need to move fast," said Driftwood, 47, the former middle school principal. He'd spent 19 years watching how children behaved when adults actually listened to them versus when they'd learned adults didn't care. He knew the difference between a fabricator and a truth-teller. Wade was the latter. If Voss realizes we know, he'll either run or destroy evidence. We go now, we go quiet. We secure the girl first. Pitchfork nodded. "Agreed. Hawthorne, you take point. Wade shows us the location. Sandstone, you're on medical. Driftwood, you handle Wade. Keep him calm. Get his full statement documented. Chainsaw, you start pulling records. I want Voss's financials, the probate filing, and anything that ties him to the previous victim." Previous victim? That came from a younger brother at the back. Flintlock, 31, IT forensics background, the kind of man who could extract deleted text threads from a phone in under 6 hours. "The old woman in Natchez," Hawthorne said grimly. Wade heard Voss say, "Same as the old woman in Natchez. Clean paperwork, clean exit. Nobody looks twice at a funeral home." He's done this before. The lot erupted in low murmurs. Not shock. Rage. Controlled, disciplined rage from men who'd spent decades learning how to channel anger into action instead of chaos. "We're going to need more bodies," Pitchfork said. He looked at Hawthorne. "How many you thinking?" "All of them." "Arkansas chapter? Already on the road? Called them before you got here." Pitchfork pulled his phone again. This time the call lasted less than 30 seconds. When he hung up, "We've got 109 confirmed. Mississippi, Arkansas, 2 from Tennessee who were passing through Memphis. They'll stage at the truck stop on Route 9 in 90 minutes. 109 Hell's Angels. For one 8-year-old girl who'd been declared dead while she was still breathing." Wade was led to a picnic table under the oak tree at the cemetery's edge. Driftwood sat across from him, a small notebook open, a recorder placed between them. "Wade," Driftwood said gently, "I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer as clearly as you can. Take your time. If you don't know something, say you don't know. Don't guess. Understood?" Wade nodded. "How old are you?" 11. "Where do you live?" "Harlan County Group Home for Boys, 318 Mill Creek Road." "How long have you lived there?" 22 months. My dad died of an overdose. Accidental. They placed me 9 days later." Driftwood's expression didn't change, but his eyes. Wade saw something there. Understanding. The look of someone who knew what it felt like to lose everything in 9 days. "I'm sorry, Wade." "Thank you, sir. Tell me about the night you found Nell." Wade told it. The thunderstorm, the loose fence board, the 2.3-mile walk to the warehouse where he sheltered when the group home got too loud at night, the northeast subroom behind the gin machinery, the burlap sacking, the fever, the girl who should have been buried but was breathing. Driftwood wrote it all down, every detail, every date, every measurement. Then he asked the question Wade had been dreading. "Did you tell anyone before you told Hawthorne?" "Yes, sir. 3 times. "Who?" "First," Wade said, "I told the overnight supervisor at the group home, Mr. Fenway. It was 6:40 in the morning, 21 days ago, November 7th. I told him there was a sick girl in the warehouse on Route 9. He was filling out attendance sheets. He didn't look up. He wrote something in the incident log and told me to go brush my teeth. What did he write? I snuck a look later. It said, overactive imagination. No action required. He never called anyone. Driftwood's jaw tightened. Second attempt? 16 days ago. I flagged down a police car on Route 9 near the warehouse. The officer got out. I told him everything. He asked my name. He went to his car and ran it on his system. Then he got back in the car and told me, "Go back to your home, son." He drove away. Did you see what he looked at on his system? No, sir, but I know what he saw. There's a flag on my file. Says I'm a fabricator. Why does it say that? Wade hesitated. This was the part that had killed every attempt before. The part that made adults stop listening. 13 months ago, Wade said quietly, I reported that a supervisor at the group home took cash from the boys' commissary fund. The supervisor denied it. They put a note in my file that I make false accusations. The supervisor resigned 4 months later for unrelated reasons. The note stayed in my file. Driftwood stopped writing, looked up. Wade, was the accusation false? No, sir. He took $340 over 6 weeks. I saw him do it twice. So you told the truth and got labeled a liar? Yes, sir. And that label has followed you ever since? Yes, sir. Driftwood closed his notebook, leaned forward. Wade, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it. You are not a liar. You are the only honest person in this entire mess. Every adult who turned you away failed. Not you. Them. Do you understand? Wade's throat was tight. He nodded. Third attempt? Driftwood asked gently. Wade took a breath. 9 days ago, 3 people from Rotary Club. They were leaving a lunch meeting at the Civic Center. I walked up to them on the steps. I asked if I could speak to someone who could help a sick child. One of the men... Wade stopped, swallowed. He looked at me, at my hoodie, at my sneakers, at the wristband from the group home, and he said, "The group home is on Mill Creek Road, son. They'll sort you out over there." Then they all walked to their cars. Did you try to explain? One of them was a woman. She's on the County Children's Services Advisory Board. I thought she might listen, but she didn't even look at me. She just got in her car. Driftwood's pen was pressed so hard against the notebook that Wade could hear the paper creak. One more question, Driftwood said. Why didn't you give up? Wade looked at him. Because Nell's still there, sir, and nobody else was going. 20 minutes later, Hawthorne found Wade sitting on the back bumper of someone's truck, drinking a Gatorade that Sandstone had handed him from a cooler. Wade looked small. Smaller than he'd looked standing at the grave with his feet planted and his voice steady. Now he just looked like what he was, an 11-year-old boy who'd been carrying something way too heavy for way too long. Hawthorne sat down next to him. Didn't say anything at first, just sat there, 2 people on a truck bumper in a cemetery parking lot surrounded by motorcycles and men who were waiting for orders. You did good in there, Hawthorne said finally. With Driftwood. I just told him what happened. That's all we needed. The truth. That's the thing that'll hold when we get to court. Wade nodded. Took a sip of Gatorade. Can I ask you something? Hawthorne said. Yes, sir. Why didn't you run? When you found her, when you realized what you'd stumbled into, you could have walked away, gone back to the group home, pretended you never saw her. No one would have known. Wade was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Hawthorne thought maybe the question was too big. But then Wade spoke, and his voice was so quiet Hawthorne had to lean closer to hear. My mom died 3 years ago, Wade said. Ovarian cancer. It took 8 months. At the end, she was in hospice. And I remember... He stopped. Swallowed. I remember one night she woke up crying because she was afraid of dying alone. She asked me to stay with her, so I did. I sat in the chair next to her bed and I held her hand and I didn't let go until the nurse came in the morning and told me she'd passed. Hawthorne's chest tightened. When I found Nell, Wade continued, she was so scared, and she was alone, and I kept thinking about my mom, about how the worst thing in the world isn't dying. It's dying alone, or being hurt alone, or being scared alone. He looked at Hawthorne. I couldn't leave her there. I couldn't do that. Hawthorne was quiet for 5 seconds. Then he said, very softly, "Your mom would be proud of you." Wade's eyes filled. He blinked fast. "There's something else," Wade said. "Something I didn't tell Driftwood yet." Hawthorne straightened. "What is it?" "The night I heard the phone call. The night Voss said the thing about the old woman in Natchez. I heard him say a name." "What name?" "Eugenia. He said, Eugenia was easier. She didn't have family asking questions." Then he laughed. Hawthorne's blood went cold. "Eugenia." "Yes, sir. I don't know who she is, but I wrote it down when I got back to the group home. I hid the paper inside my pillowcase." Hawthorne stood, pulled out his phone. Dialed Chainsaw. "I need you to run a name," Hawthorne said. The second Chainsaw picked up. "Eugenia, connected to Natchez, Adams County, possibly connected to Randall Voss. Look for death records, estate filings, anything with Voss listed as executor or funeral director." "On it," Chainsaw said. "Give me 10 minutes." By the time the full chapter assembled under the oak tree at 10:15 a.m., the layers of horror had stacked into a clear, undeniable picture. Layer 1. Surface problem. Nell is hungry, injured, and alone in a warehouse. Layer 2. Deeper abuse. Untreated fracture, healing wrong for 49 days. Pneumonia from 49 nights in an unheated concrete room. Weight 19 pounds below healthy. Burn mark on her forearm from the night she tried to scream. Layer 3. Systemic failure. Wade reported to supervisor. Logged as imagination. No call made. Wade reported to police. Fabricator flag. No welfare check. No report filed. Wade reported to Rotary Club civic leaders, including a woman on the Children's Services Advisory Board. Redirected to group home. 0 follow-up. Fourth attempt. Wade left written note at sheriff's substation. Deputy called Voss to confirm death status. Voss confirmed. Deputy filed no further action. Layer 4. The master plan. Randall. Voss filed Nell's death certificate in 31 hours. Minimum standard, 72 hours. Appointed himself estate executor in 4 days through probate judge relationship, standard minimum, 30 days. Structured settlement annuity worth $247,800 triggers upon Nell's legal death. Routes to estate. Voss holds disbursement authority. Timeline. Death certificate becomes uncontestable on day 60, 11 days from now. Voss has pre-allocated spending. $38,500 down payment on Gulfport waterfront property, $14,200 boat deposit, $9,100 wire to Costa Rica account. Total pre-spent, $61,800. Previous victim, Eugenia. Last name pending Chainsaw's search. Same as Natchez. Clean paperwork, clean exit. Nobody looks twice at a funeral home. Pitchfork stood in front of 109 Hell's Angels and laid it out. Every layer, every number, every failure. When he finished, the silence lasted 8 seconds. Then a brother named Coldwater, 74 years old, chapter co-founder, a man who'd attended every Harlan County Bar Association dinner for 22 years and had 3 attorneys in the county who owed him personal favors, stood up. All in favor of full chapter protection for Nell Pruitt and Wade Hollis? Every single hand went up. Not one dissent, not one hesitation, 109 men voting unanimously to help a girl they'd never met and a boy the system had already labeled worthless. Pitchfork looked at Hawthorne. "She's your daughter. You call it." Hawthorne looked at Wade. "Can you take us there?" Wade stood. "Yes, sir." "Then let's go bring her home." The formation rolled out at 10:47 a.m., not in a roar of chaos, in disciplined rows, tight, smooth, practiced from years of riding together. Hawthorne led. Wade rode behind him, arms wrapped around Hawthorne's waist, the Hell's Angels vest still draped over his shoulders. Behind them, pitchfork, chainsaw, sandstone, driftwood, flintlock, Coldwater. Behind them, 103 more brothers in perfect staggered formation, 2 by 2, chrome gleaming in the late morning sun. The sound started low, distant, like thunder building on the horizon. Then it grew into something that shook windows in houses 3 blocks away and set off car alarms in the Piggly Wiggly parking lot on Route 9. By the time the formation reached the abandoned Pruitt agricultural warehouse, a hulking corrugated metal structure set back 200 feet from the road, surrounded by gravel and overgrown weeds, the rumble was deafening. Beautiful. Deafening. Thunder. They parked in the overflow field across from the main entrance, one by one. Engines dying in near-perfect unison until the sound faded and only silence remained. Heavy. Expectant. The kind of silence that meant something was about to shift. 109 motorcycles lined the gravel in formation. 109 Hell's Angels stood there, not moving, not shouting, simply present. And every person who'd driven past that warehouse for 49 days without once wondering what was inside, every person who'd seen Wade walking this road at night and assumed he was just another group home kid with nowhere to go, understood, in that moment, exactly what they'd missed. Now, I know what you might be imagining. 109 Hell's Angels descending on a warehouse, fists ready, ready to tear the place apart, ready to drag a man into the street and deliver the kind of justice that doesn't wait for courtrooms. And maybe, years ago, that's exactly what would have happened. But this was different. Because Hawthorne Pruitt had spent 11 years learning that the scariest thing you can do to a man who operates in shadows isn't to beat him. It's to drag every single thing he's done into the light and make sure it's documented so thoroughly that no lawyer, no judge, no amount of community standing can make it disappear. Pitchfork gave one signal. A raised hand. Closed fist. The brothers split into teams. Practiced. Coordinated. Military precision from men who understood that chaos loses in court and discipline wins. Team 1, medical extraction. Sandstone, 2 brothers with EMT backgrounds. Hawthorne, Wade. Team 2, evidence securing. Chainsaw, Flintlock, 4 brothers with law enforcement backgrounds. Team 3, perimeter control. Pitchfork, 15 brothers positioned at every entrance, every exit, every road that led to this warehouse. No one in, no one out, not until they were done. Team 4, witness canvas. Driftwood, Coldwater, 12 brothers fanning out to every house, every business within half a mile, knocking on doors, asking questions, documenting who saw what and when. Wade led Hawthorne and Sandstone to the northeast corner of the warehouse, to a padlocked door that shouldn't have been locked from the outside unless someone was being kept inside against their will. Hawthorne didn't ask permission. He didn't call for bolt cutters. He pulled a Leatherman from his belt, worked the lock for 40 seconds, and the padlock clicked open. The door swung wide. The sub-room was 14 feet by 9 feet. Concrete floor, water seepage along the east wall, no windows. A single battery lantern casting weak yellow light that made the shadows look bigger than they were. And in the corner, wrapped in 2 wool blankets that Wade had stolen from the group home's laundry 3 weeks ago, was Nell. She looked up when the door opened. Her face was pale to the point of gray. Her lips cracked and split, her hair matted on one side where she'd been sleeping against the wall for so many nights she'd stopped trying to fix it. But her eyes were Hawthorne's eyes exactly, dark brown, still alive. She didn't scream, didn't run, just stared at the man in the doorway like she was trying to decide if he was real or if the fever had finally taken her somewhere her mind couldn't come back from. Nell. Hawthorne's voice broke on her name. He dropped to his knees, didn't approach, just knelt there, 6 feet away, letting her see him, letting her decide. Baby, it's me, it's Daddy. Nell blinked, once, twice. Her mouth opened, closed. When she spoke, her voice was so hoarse it barely qualified as sound. Did the boy find you? Did he show you the picture? Hawthorne pulled the laminated school photo from his pocket, held it up. He showed me. And he's here. Wade's right here. Wade stepped into the doorway. Nell's face crumpled. She tried to stand and her legs buckled. Hawthorne crossed the 6 feet in 2 steps and caught her before she hit the concrete. She weighed 43 pounds, 19 pounds below where she should have been. He could feel every rib through the yellow and white striped dress she'd been wearing since October 9th. I've got you, Hawthorne whispered into her hair. I've got you, baby. You're safe now. I've got you. Nell started to cry. Not loud, just silent, shaking sobs that made her whole body tremble against his chest. Sandstone moved in with his medical kit, knelt beside them. His voice was calm, gentle. The voice of a man who'd triaged wounded soldiers in field hospitals and knew exactly how to assess without alarming. Nell, my name is Sandstone. I'm a medic. I'm going to check you over, okay? I'm not going to hurt you. I just need to see where you're hurt so we can help. Can you show me your left wrist? Nell pulled her left arm from under the blanket. The wrist was visibly swollen, thickened at the fracture site, healing at a 23-degree wrong angle. She couldn't close that hand fully. The fingers curled halfway and stopped. Sandstone's jaw tightened. He pulled a penlight, checked her pupils, listened to her lungs with a stethoscope. The sound of her breathing, wet, rattling, the unmistakable sound of fluid where there shouldn't be fluid, made him close his eyes for half a second. Pneumonia, Sandstone said quietly to Hawthorne. Early stage, but progressing. The wrist needs surgical intervention within 3 weeks, or she's looking at permanent limited mobility. She's severely dehydrated, malnourished, vitamin D deficiency, and that, he gestured to a circular burn mark on her right forearm. That's deliberate. Someone burned her. When? Hawthorne's voice was flat. Sandstone examined it. 2 weeks old, maybe. Looks like a cigarette. Nell spoke up, her voice small. I tried to scream. He said if I screamed again, he'd show Daddy pictures that would make him think I was already gone. So I stopped. The The room went silent. The kind of silent that feels like the air has been sucked out. Wade was crying now, standing in the doorway with tears running down his face. Sandstone was gripping his medical kit so hard his knuckles had gone white. Hawthorne just held his daughter. And when he spoke, his voice was so quiet, it barely registered as sound. "Did he tell you I wasn't looking for you?" Nell nodded against his chest. "He lied, baby. I've been looking since the second they told me you were gone. I've been at your grave every single morning. I never stopped. I was just looking in the wrong place. But I'm here now, and you're never going back in this room. Never." While Sandstone wrapped Nell in a thermal blanket and carried her out to the ambulance that Pitchfork had called 20 minutes prior, Chainsaw and Flintlock went to work. Chainsaw photographed everything. The padlock, the sub-room dimensions, the battery lantern, the 2 wool blankets, the 5-gallon water jug that was 3/4 empty, the burlap strips Wade had cut for Nell's feet, the torn yellow and white dress, every single detail that would matter when this hit a courtroom. Flintlock found the phone. It was tucked in a metal storage locker near the loading entrance. Not Voss's personal phone. A burner. Cheap, prepaid Android with a cracked screen. Flintlock powered it on, connected it to a portable drive, and started pulling data. Text messages. Deleted but recoverable. Between 2 numbers. No names. Just initials. RV and S. RV. October 9th, 11:43 p.m. Package secure. Location confirmed. Timeline starts tomorrow. SO. October 9th, 11:47 p.m. Understood. I'm out. Forwarding address is set. Don't contact me again. RV. October 12th, 9:15 a.m. Day 3, no complications. Proceeding as planned. RV. October 19th, 7:32 p.m. Certificate filed. Judge approved executive appointment. 60-day clock starts now. RV. November 14th, 10:58 p.m. Day 36, still on schedule. Transfer pre-authorized for day 60. Flintlock looked up at Chainsaw. RV is Randall Voss. SO, I'm guessing Sandra Oakes. The EMT who resigned 6 days after the accident. She's the one who intercepted the scene. Redirected Nell before County EMS arrived. Can you trace SO's current location? Give me 4 hours. Dorothy Tate lived in a farmhouse 0.8 miles east of the warehouse on Route 9. She'd lived there for 38 years, raised 3 kids in that house, buried her husband from that house. And on October 9th, at approximately 4:17 p.m., she'd been the one to call 911 after witnessing a 2-car accident on the curve near her driveway. Driftwood and Coldwater knocked on her door at 11:20 a.m. She answered in a floral apron, smelling like cinnamon and something baking. Her face went pale the second she saw the Hells Angels patches. "Ma'am," Driftwood said gently, "we're not here to frighten you. We're here about the accident on October 9th. The one you called in." Dorothy's hand went to her throat. "The Pruitt accident." "Yes, ma'am. Can you tell us what you saw?" She invited them in, sat them at her kitchen table, poured coffee neither of them asked for. Her hands were shaking. "I saw the whole thing," Dorothy said. 2 cars. The Pruitt vehicle and a truck that ran the stop sign. Mrs. Pruitt was killed instantly, I could tell. But the little girl, Nell, she was moving, crying. I called 911 at 4:17. I stayed on the line. The dispatcher said an ambulance was en route. 8 minutes. Did the ambulance arrive? Coldwater asked. Dorothy's face twisted. One did, but it wasn't county EMS. It was, I don't know, unmarked, white van, no official decals. A woman got out. She went straight to the girl, loaded her into the van, drove off. Did you tell anyone? I called the dispatcher back. I said, that wasn't the ambulance I saw on TV. That wasn't official. The dispatcher checked the logs. She said county EMS had been dispatched, but was diverted to a multi-vehicle accident on Highway 12. She said the van I saw must have been a private transfer arranged by the family. But Mrs. Pruitt was dead. Who arranged a private transfer? Dorothy's eyes filled. I don't know. I asked the same question, but I was told it was handled. And then a week later, I saw the obituary. Nell Pruitt died in the accident alongside her mother. And I thought I must have been wrong. I thought maybe the girl I saw moving was just, I don't know, reflex, death movements, something. I convinced myself I was wrong. You weren't wrong, Driftwood said quietly. Dorothy started to cry. I should have pushed harder. I knew something wasn't right. I knew it. But I told myself the professionals had it handled. I told myself I was just a neighbor who didn't understand how these things worked. And that little girl has been... She couldn't finish. Coldwater pulled out a small recorder. Mrs. Tate, we need you to repeat everything you just said on record. Will you do that? Yes. Yes, anything. God, yes. Harmon Greer had processed Nell Pruitt's death certificate on October 10th at 7:52 a.m. 31 hours after the accident. He'd been the county records clerk for 19 years. He knew the procedures. He knew the timelines. And he knew that 31 hours was impossibly fast for a minor fatality. When Chainsaw walked into the county clerk's office at 12:15 p.m. and asked to speak to Harmon Greer about the Pruitt death certificate, Harmon didn't even pretend to be surprised. I've been waiting for someone to ask about that, Harmon said. He pulled a folder from his desk drawer. A personal folder. Not county property. This is my photocopy. I kept it because the timeline never sat right. He laid it on the counter. Death certificate. Filed October 10th, 7:52 a.m. Signed by Randall Voss, funeral director. Cause of death. Blunt force trauma. Accident-related injuries. Time of death. October 9th, 4:23 p.m. State statute requires a minimum 72-hour review period for accident fatalities involving minors, Harmon said. It's supposed to allow time for autopsy, for family notification, for any investigative holds. This was filed in 31 hours. I flagged it. Sent a query to my supervisor. What did your supervisor say? He said Voss had worked with Judge Greer on expedited processing due to family request. Judge Greer is my cousin. I called him. He confirmed. Said the family wanted closure quickly. Said it was all above board. But you didn't believe him. I believed him, Harmon said quietly. That's the problem. I believed him because he's my cousin, and because Randall Voss has been doing funerals in this county for 22 years, and I couldn't imagine a reason he'd lie. So I let it go. I let it go. And I kept this photocopy in my drawer because some part of me knew. He stopped, swallowed. I knew something was off. I just didn't know what. You know now, Chainsaw said. Yeah, I know now. Patricia had worked Thursday evenings at the Harlan County Crisis Hotline for 6 years. Randall Voss had been her co-volunteer for 3 of those years. They'd manned the phones together, listened to people in their worst moments, talked them through grief, addiction, suicidal ideation. Randall had always been good at it. Calm, measured, never raised his voice. Patricia had trusted him completely. Until about 18 months ago, when he'd started asking strange questions. Coldwater found her at the Methodist Church on Pike Street, arranging flowers for Sunday service. When he asked if she'd worked with Randall Voss, her face went tight. "I did, until I quit." "Why'd you quit?" Patricia set down the flowers. He started asking questions that didn't fit. We'd be on a slow night, no calls coming in, and he'd bring up estate law, probate procedures, how long it took for insurance payouts after a death, how executor appointments worked. At first I thought he was just curious. He's a funeral director. It made sense he'd interface with that world. But then he asked me— She paused, took a breath. He asked me, if someone was declared dead but wasn't actually dead, how long would it take before the paperwork became uncontestable? I thought it was a hypothetical, some ethics question. I told him, in Mississippi, 60 days post-filing for a death certificate. After that, you'd need extraordinary evidence and a court order to challenge it. He smiled, thanked me, wrote it down. When was this? March of last year, 18 months ago. Did you report it? Report what? Patricia's voice cracked. A co-worker asking a hypothetical question? I had nothing concrete, nothing illegal, just a feeling. A bad feeling. So I quit. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself Randall was a good man. I told myself I was wrong. She wasn't wrong. By 1:30 p.m., the full picture had assembled. Rung 1. Group Home Supervisor dismissed Wade's report, logged it as imagination, never called authorities. Rung 2. Police officer ran Wade's name, saw fabricator flag, returned to patrol car without filing welfare check. Rung 3. Rotary Club civic leaders, including a county children's services advisory board member, redirected Wade to group home, 0 follow-up. Rung 4. Deputy Carl Simmons received Wade's written note at the sheriff's substation. Called Voss Family Funeral Services to confirm Nell's death status. Voss confirmed. Deputy filed no further action. Rung 5. The final corruption. Judge Foster Greer approved Randall Voss's executorship petition in 4 days instead of the standard 30-day minimum. Judge Greer had used Voss Family Funeral Services for 3 family members over the past decade. The relationship wasn't illegal. It was just convenient. And when Voss filed expedited death certificate processing citing family request, Judge Greer signed off without secondary review. Not because the system was broken, because the system worked exactly as designed. Built to trust professionals. Built to move quickly when everyone involved vouched for each other. Built to require extraordinary proof before questioning a funeral director with 22 years of community standing. The problem wasn't that the gears didn't turn. The problem was that they turned smoothly in favor of a man who knew exactly how to oil them. Chainsaw's phone rang at 1:47 p.m. He answered. Listened. His face went stone. You're sure? Pause. Send me everything. He hung up. Walked to Pitchfork. We've got the previous victim. Pitchfork gestured for the group to tighten. Hawthorne, still holding Nell in the back of the ambulance, leaned closer to hear. Eugenia Voss Halcourt, Chainsaw said. Randall's elderly aunt by marriage, 81 years old, lived in Natchez, Adams County. Died, officially, in May of 2021. Natural causes. Cardiac event. Voss was listed as funeral director and estate executor. Payout? Pitchfork asked. $163,400. Estate disbursement. Voss handled everything. What's the flag? Eugenia was seen alive by a Natchez Care Facility nurse 7 months after her declared death date. The nurse filed a private complaint with the facility administrator. The complaint was never formally investigated. It sat in a file until the facility closed in 2022. My contact found it in archived records. Where's Eugenia now? Unknown. The official story is she died and was cremated. No family members other than Voss were present at or notified of the funeral. The cardiac event wasn't preceded by any documented cardiac history, and Chainsaw pulled out a folder. Voss moved Eugenia from her original care facility to an unlicensed private home 3 months before her declared death. No oversight, no monitoring, just Randall Voss and whatever arrangement he made. Hawthorne's voice cut through the quiet. He's done this twice. At least twice, Chainsaw corrected. We don't know how many others, but the pattern is identical. Elderly victim or minor victim with access to estate funds. Randall positions himself as executor, files paperwork rapidly through personal relationships with approving authorities. Declared death triggers payout. Clean paperwork, clean exit. Nell, still wrapped in Sandstone's thermal blanket, spoke up quietly. He told me my daddy gave up looking. He said I was already replaced. Every man in that circle went still. Baby, Hawthorne said, his voice shaking. I never stopped looking. Not for 1 second. He lied. I know, Nell whispered. Wade told me you'd come. He said you just didn't know where to look yet. So I waited. At 2:14 p.m., Harlan County Sheriff's deputies arrived at Voss family funeral services, 214 Commerce Avenue. Chainsaw had made the call 30 minutes prior. Laid out the evidence. The deputies had arrived with a warrant. When they walked through the front door, Randall Eugene Voss was in the arrangement room with a family, helping them select a casket for their father who'd died of a stroke 3 days prior. He was wearing his dark suit, speaking in that low, measured funeral director voice. His hands were folded in front of him, respectful, professional. I'm so sorry for your loss, Voss was saying. My only concern, always and without exception, is ensuring your father receives the dignity he deserves. The lead deputy, a woman named Corwin, who'd been on the force for 14 years and had seen Voss at community events, Rotary lunches, Meals on Wheels stops, walked up to him and said 4 words. Randall Voss, you're under arrest. Voss blinked, looked at her like she'd spoken a language he didn't understand. I'm sorry. There must be some mistake. I'm with a family. Step outside, Mr. Voss. The family looked confused, frightened. Voss held up one hand, the same calm, placating gesture he'd used 1,000 times to comfort grieving families. Deputy, if this is about a parking ticket or some administrative issue, can we handle it after I've finished? This is about Nell Pruitt, Deputy Corwin said. The child you declared dead on October 10th. The child we found alive in the Pruitt Agricultural Warehouse 90 minutes ago. The arrangement room went silent. Voss's face didn't change. Not immediately. But his hands, his careful, soft hands, twitched. Just once. I don't know what you're talking about. You're under arrest for child endangerment, kidnapping, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. They read him his rights there in the arrangement room. Handcuffed him in front of the family he'd been comforting 30 seconds prior. Walked him out the front door where 109 Hell's Angels stood in perfect formation across the street, watching. Voss looked at them. At Hawthorne, standing at the front, Nell in his arms. At Wade beside him, still wearing the Hell's Angels vest. And for the first time in 22 years, Randall Voss's measured composure cracked. "I was careful," he said. Not to the deputies, to himself. "I was so careful." Deputy Corwin guided him into the patrol car, closed the door. The last thing anyone heard from Randall Voss before the car pulled away was him asking quietly if someone could call his neighbor about his mail. As if that were the thing that needed handling. As if the world he'd built, and the world he'd destroyed, could wait while he sorted out his correspondence. It was Flintlock who found it. He'd been sitting in the back of Chainsaw's truck for the past 40 minutes, extracting data from the burner phone when a notification lit up the screen. An email. Auto-forwarded from a linked account Voss hadn't bothered to unlink. The subject line. Delta Line Holdings, LLC. Annual Report. Flintlock opened it, scanned the contents. His face went pale. "Chainsaw," Flintlock called. "You need to see this." By 3 p.m., the core team had regrouped at the Hells Angels clubhouse on Industrial Road. A single-story brick building with a bar, a pool table, and a back room that doubled as a strategy space when strategy was needed. Flintlock connected his laptop to a monitor, pulled up the files. "Delta Line Holdings, LLC," Flintlock said. "Shell company registered in Mississippi in 2018. Listed owner R.E. Voss. The company holds quiet interests in 3 properties: the Pruitt Agricultural Warehouse where we found Nell, a storage facility in Natchez, and a duplex in Biloxi." Chainsaw leaned forward. "Pull the financials." Flintlock navigated through folders. Bank statements appeared on screen. Layer 1. The pattern. "Look at the dates," Flintlock said, highlighting transactions. May 14th, 2021. Deposit of $163,400 into Delta Line Holdings account. Source: Estate Disbursement. Eugenia Voss Halcourt. "That's the Natchez victim," Chainsaw said. "Right. Now look at this." Flintlock scrolled. October 12th, 2021. 7 months later. Wire transfer out $52,000 to an offshore account in Belize. Memo line: Consulting Services. "Laundering," Chainsaw said flatly. "Gets better. Look at the account activity from this year. Pre-authorized wire transfer dated for December 1st. That's 11 days from now. For $247,800. Memo. Estate Settlement, N. Pruitt." "He scheduled the transfer before Nell was even declared dead," Pitchfork said. "Not before. The same day. Look at the timestamp. October 10th, 9:43 a.m., 2 hours after he filed the death certificate." The room went cold. Layer 2. The connection. "There's more," Flintlock continued. "Email thread between Voss and someone identified as S.O., Sandra Oakes, the EMT. Subject: Protocol Confirmation. Sent October 7th, 2 days before the accident." He pulled it up on screen. Email from S.O. to R.V. October 7th, 3:14 p.m. "Confirmed. I'm on rotation for Route 9 coverage October 9th to 12th. If anything happens in that window, I'll handle intercept. Standard protocol. Subject secured, official response delayed minimum 15 minutes. Enough?" Email from R.V. to S.O. October 7th, 3:52 p.m. 15 is sufficient. Payment on completion as discussed. $18,000 cash. Leave forwarding address, then disappear. Driftwood, standing at the back, spoke quietly. They planned it. The accident wasn't opportunistic. They were waiting for it. "Or they caused it," Chainsaw said. Layer 3, previous victim, different numbers. Flintlock pulled up a second estate file. Eugenia Voss Halcourt. Detailed records. Eugenia's payout was $163,400. Voss was appointed executor in Adams County Probate Court on March 3, 2021. Eugenia's official date of death, May 11, 2021. That's 69 days after Voss took executorship, right at the edge of Mississippi's probate review window. Same playbook, Pitchfork said. Exactly, but here's the kicker. Flintlock opened a scanned medical document. Eugenia had a care plan through Natchez Memorial, documented visits every 2 weeks. But starting February 18, 2021, 2 weeks before Voss took executorship, the visits stopped. Reason listed, patient relocated to private care at family request. The private care facility had no license, no oversight. It was a duplex in Natchez owned by Delta Line Holdings, Chainsaw finished. Bingo. The room was silent for 8 seconds. Then Hawthorne, who'd been standing in the doorway holding Nell, said very quietly, "How many others?" Flintlock closed his eyes. "I don't know yet, but Delta Line Holdings has been active since 2018. That's 6 years. If Voss ran this scheme even once a year..." "We're looking at 6 to 10 victims," Chainsaw said. "Minimum." Judge Foster Greer lived in a colonial-style house on Magnolia Drive. White columns, manicured lawn, the kind of house that screamed respectability. Coldwater and Chainsaw arrived at 4:15 p.m., knocked on the door. The judge answered in khakis and a polo shirt, reading glasses perched on his nose. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" "We need to talk about Randall Voss," Chainsaw said. "And the executorship petition you approved in 4 days instead of 30. Judge Greer's face went carefully neutral. "I don't discuss court matters with Hell's Angels," Coldwater finished. "We're not asking about court matters, Your Honor. We're asking about shortcuts. We're asking about why a man you've used as a funeral director 3 times in 10 years got an executorship approval in 4 days when state guidelines require 30. The family requested expedited processing." "What family?" Chainsaw asked. "Mrs. Pruitt was dead. Mr. Pruitt, Hawthorne, never made that request. We've checked. So who requested it?" Judge Greer's jaw tightened. "Randall Voss, acting as the family's representative. Voss requested his own expedited approval. That's not irregular. In cases where the deceased has no immediate family present to..." "Nell had a father," Coldwater interrupted. "Hawthorne Pruitt, alive, capable, never contacted. You approved Voss's executorship without confirming that the child's living parent had been notified or consulted. I relied on Voss's representation that you relied on a man who'd done 3 funerals for your family. A man you trusted. A man you didn't question because questioning him would have been uncomfortable." Judge Greer opened his mouth, closed it. Chainsaw leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen, Judge. You're going to tell me everything. Every shortcut you approved. Every expedited filing. Every time Randall Voss walked into your office and you signed something without secondary review because he was a friend. And you're going to do it now, on the record, or I make one call and the FBI is at your door asking why a sitting probate judge facilitated a child kidnapping scheme." Judge Greer went white. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear to God, I didn't know what he was doing." "But you didn't check?" "No." "How many times did you approve executorships for Voss?" The judge sat down heavily in a chair by the door. 7. Over 6 years. I approved 7 executorship petitions for Randall Voss. The number hit like a stone. "Names," Chainsaw said. Judge Greer went inside, came back with a folder, handed it over. "These are the files. Every petition I approved. I kept copies because..." He stopped, swallowed. Because part of me wondered. Part of me knew something felt wrong. But I told myself Randall was trustworthy. I told myself I was just being paranoid. Chainsaw opened the folder, scanned the names. Eugenia Voss Halcourt, Eleanor Pritchard, Samuel Oakes, Margaret Dean, Robert Talmadge, Vivian Cross, Nell Pruitt. 7 names. 7 people Randall Voss had positioned himself to control. This is the part that made every man in that room feel something heavier than anger. Not the predator. The predator was easy to understand. A man who made a calculation, saw vulnerable people as dollar signs, and executed a plan. But Judge Foster Greer? He wasn't evil. He was comfortable. He was a man who'd spent 22 years on the bench learning that the system worked best when you trusted the professionals in front of you, when you signed the right paperwork and moved the cases along and didn't ask uncomfortable questions that might make a colleague defensive. He'd convinced himself that speed equaled efficiency, that trust equaled competence. And now 7 people were dead or missing because he'd chosen comfort over diligence. At 5:30 p.m., a gray sedan pulled into the clubhouse parking lot. A woman stepped out. Mid-40s, practical navy blazer, no makeup, the kind of tired that came from working a case too long with too few leads. She walked to the clubhouse door. Knocked. Pitchfork answered. Looked her up and down. Didn't move to let her in. Special Agent Meredith Keene, the woman said. FBI Financial Crimes Unit, Jackson Field Office. I'm told you have something relevant to an open federal investigation. Pitchfork crossed his arms. Depends on what you're investigating. Randall Eugene Voss, Delta Line Holdings, LLC. Estate fraud. Possible elder abuse and child endangerment spanning 6 years across 3 counties. Pitchfork looked back at Hawthorne. A decision was made without words. He stepped aside. Agent Keene walked into the back room. Saw chainsaw, flintlock, cold water, driftwood. Saw the monitor with financial records pulled up. Saw the folder from Judge Greer on the table. Hawthorne stood, didn't extend his hand. How long has your office known about Randall Voss? Agent Keene met his eyes. 14 months. We've been building a financial case. Wire fraud, probate fraud. We had the money trail. We didn't have the victims. 14 months. Hawthorne's voice was flat. My daughter was in a warehouse for 49 days. You had 14 months. Agent Keene had no good response. She knew it. We built the case legally. Carefully. By the book. I understand that's not, we got her out in 3 hours, Hawthorne interrupted. You had 14 months. The room was silent. You're right, Agent Keene said finally. You did what we couldn't do fast enough. Chainsaw laid out the files. One at a time. Physical documents placed on the table. The burner phone. The Delta Lane Holdings financial records. The email thread between Voss and Sandra Oakes. The 7 executorship petitions from Judge Greer. Agent Keene reviewed each item. Her expression shifted. She stopped writing. Set her pen down. Leaned forward. This fills a gap we haven't been able to close for 14 months, she said quietly. We had the financial trail. We had the wire transfers. We didn't have the communication records. We didn't have the judge's cooperation. We didn't have this. She pulled out her phone, made a call. Sir, it's Keene. I'm at the Hells Angels Clubhouse in Harlan Crossing. I need a warrant for Sandra Oakes, arrest authority for Judge Foster Greer as material witness, and a forensic accounting team at Delta Line Holdings by morning. Pause. Yes, sir. We have everything. She hung up, looked at Hawthorne. If this is authenticated, and I have no doubt it will be, it changes the scope of the charges significantly. We're looking at RICO, conspiracy, wire fraud across state lines. This isn't just Randall Voss anymore. This is a network. Hawthorne stepped forward. I have one condition for full cooperation. Agent Keene waited. Nell gets a victim advocate assigned before the first interview. She doesn't talk to anyone unless she asks first. And the second arrest, Sandra Oaks, happens today, not after another week of paperwork. Today. Agent Keene considered. The advocate, yes. I can make that call right now. The interview terms, yes. Sandra Oaks, she paused. We don't have her location yet. Flintlock spoke up. I do. Tracked her phone records. She's in Pensacola, Florida, apartment on Gulf Breeze Boulevard. I can have the address on your phone in 2 minutes. Agent Keene almost smiled. Then we move tonight. Hawthorne nodded. One more thing, Agent Keene. Yes? You do right by her. By all of them. That's the job. A beat. That's the job, Agent Keene agreed. After the agent left, the clubhouse was quiet. The system wasn't broken. That was the thing people got wrong. A broken system could be fixed. This one worked exactly as designed, built to move slowly, to require proof beyond doubt, to protect the rights of the accused even at the cost of the victim's time. Nobody built it to be cruel. It just turned out that way sometimes, when the person inside it needed saving faster than the paperwork could catch up. The brothers hadn't replaced the system. They'd bought the time the system needed to work. At 7 p.m., the full picture assembled. Chainsaw stood in front of the monitor. Flintlock had pulled every file, every name, every transaction. 7 victims, Chainsaw said. Confirmed. Across 6 years. The names appeared on screen. Eugenia Voss Halcourt, 2021. $163,400 payout Eleanor Pritchard, 2019. $98,200 payout. Samuel Oaks, 2020. $127,600 payout. Margaret Dean, 2022. $156,300 payout. Robert Talmadge, 2023. $183,700 payout. Vivian Cross, 2024. $142,900 payout. Nell Pruitt, 2024 interrupted. $247,800 attempted. Total stolen over 6 years, $872,100, plus the $247,800 he was attempting with Nell. That's $1,119,900. Pitchfork's voice cut through. How many are still alive? Chainsaw's face went grim. Unknown. Eugenia was spotted alive 7 months post-death. We have no confirmation on the others, but the pattern is identical. Executorship. Rapid probate approval. Death certificate filed. Estate payout. Subject disappears. We need to find them, Hawthorne said. FBI is on it, Agent Keene had said before she left. We'll be checking death records, cross-referencing medical facilities, contacting families. If anyone is still alive, we'll find them. Federal charges filed against Randall Eugene Voss, November 20th, 2024. Kidnapping of a minor. Nell Pruitt, child endangerment conspiracy to commit murder. Wire fraud. 7 counts, 1 per victim. Probate fraud. 7 counts. Elder abuse. 6 counts. RICO violations. Operating a continuing criminal enterprise. State charges filed in Harlan County, Mississippi. 8. Falsifying a death certificate. 9. Unlawful restraint. 10. Assault. burn injury to Nell Pruitt. Charges filed against Sandra Oakes. Conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Child endangerment. Obstruction of emergency services. Wire fraud, accessory. Charges pending against Judge Foster Greer. Official misconduct, pending investigation. Obstruction of justice, pending investigation. For 6 years, a man the community trusted with their worst moments had been learning which families had money and which ones were too broken by grief to check the paperwork. He stood at gravesides. He held hands. He spoke in that low, measured voice about peace and dignity. And the whole time, he was building a system that worked because people believed funeral directors didn't lie, a system that worked because probate judges signed papers without secondary review, a system that worked because a child's voice, when that child had already been labeled a fabricator, didn't matter enough for anyone to check. Until 109 Hell's Angels decided it did. Sandstone sat in the waiting room at Harlan County Medical Center while Nell was examined in room 4. He'd brought a stuffed elephant from the clubhouse gift shop, something one of the brothers had won in a claw machine and donated to the kid supply box they kept for exactly these moments. The elephant was gray, floppy-eared, wearing a tiny vest that said Brave. Nell had clutched it the entire ambulance ride. Hawthorne was in the exam room with her. The door was closed. Sandstone could hear voices through the wall. The pediatrician, Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, speaking in calm, measured tones, asking permission before every touch, explaining every procedure. 40 minutes later, the door opened. Dr. Okonkwo stepped out first. She was holding a tablet with Nell's chart pulled up. She looked at Sandstone, then at Hawthorne, who'd followed her into the hall. "The wrist requires surgical intervention," Dr. Okonkwo said. "The fracture has been healing for 49 days at a 23-degree wrong angle. We'll need to re-break it, reset it with pins and plates, then cast it for 8 weeks minimum. After that, physical therapy. 6 months total recovery timeline. But with intervention now, she'll regain 95% function." "And without intervention?" Hawthorne asked. "Permanent limited mobility. She'd never fully close that hand again." Hawthorne's jaw tightened. "When can you do the surgery?" "Tomorrow morning. 7 a.m. I've already cleared the schedule." "The pneumonia?" "Early stage. We've started antibiotics. Chest x-ray shows fluid in the lower left lobe, but it's responding to treatment. 2 weeks of medication, plenty of rest, and she should clear it completely." Dr. Okonkwo paused, set the tablet down, looked directly at Sandstone. "She told me what you all did, getting her out of there when you did." Her voice cracked slightly. "Another week in those conditions. The pneumonia would have required hospitalization. Another 2 weeks we'd be looking at sepsis. You didn't just find her, you saved her life." Sandstone nodded once. He didn't trust himself to speak. "Thank you," Dr. Okonkwo said quietly. "From one medical professional to another. Thank you for getting her here when you did." That night, Nell ate dinner at the clubhouse, not in the back strategy room. In the main area, at a table surrounded by brothers who kept their voices low and their movements careful, like they understood that loud noises and sudden gestures might send her back to the warehouse in her head. Driftwood had made spaghetti. Nothing fancy. Just pasta, red sauce, garlic bread. But it was hot. And there was enough. And no one was going to take it away. Nell ate slowly. Small bites. Testing. Waiting for the moment when someone would tell her to stop. That she'd had enough. That food was for people who deserved it. The moment never came. Wade sat next to her, still wearing the Hell's Angels vest that reached his knees. He'd refused to take it off. Hawthorne had told him, "It's yours now. You earned it." The smell of garlic and tomato sauce filled the room, the same smell that had filled Hawthorne's kitchen every Sunday before the accident, when Nell's mother was alive, and Sunday dinners meant family and safety, and the kind of ordinary warmth that felt permanent until it wasn't. Nell looked up at her father. "Can I have more?" Hawthorne's voice broke. "Baby, you can have as much as you want." The problem was simple. Hawthorne's apartment was a one-bedroom above a garage on the east side of town. It had been fine for a single man who spent most nights at the clubhouse anyway. It wasn't fine for an 8-year-old girl recovering from trauma, surgery, and 49 days of captivity. Coldwater made 2 phone calls. The first was to a brother named Ironwood, who owned a small rental property on Cypress Street, a 2-bedroom house with a fenced yard and a porch swing. The second was to the Mississippi chapter's emergency fund administrator. By 9 p.m. that same night, the solution was in place. The house on Cypress Street, $650 per month rent. The chapter voted to cover the first 6 months. $3,900 total. The vote was unanimous. Not a single dissent. Furniture, donated from 3 separate brothers' garages. A bed for Nell, a couch, a kitchen table, sheets and towels from a sister-in-law who worked at Target and accidentally ordered too many during the clearance sale. Security, Flintlock installed a camera system, front door, back door, motion-activated lights. The footage fed directly to an app on Hawthorne's phone. "If she ever feels unsafe," Flintlock said, "you'll know immediately." On November 22nd, 2 days after Nell was found, Hawthorne carried his daughter across the threshold of 47 Cypress Street. She stood in the living room, holding the stuffed elephant, looking around at space that was hers. A bedroom with a door that locked from the inside. A kitchen with a fridge that wasn't padlocked. Windows with curtains that she could open if she wanted to see the sky. Hawthorne knelt in front of her, held out a key on a purple lanyard. "This is yours. Your house. Your key. Your space. No one comes in unless you say so. Okay?" Nell took the key, closed her hand around it, nodded. "I'm safe here?" she whispered. "You're safe here." They came one at a time over the next 3 days. Not all 109, but the core group. The ones who'd been there from the cemetery to the warehouse to the clubhouse war room. Sandstone arrived first. Brought a medical kit, child-sized, Band-Aids with cartoon characters, children's Tylenol, a thermometer. "Keep this here," he said, "just in case. And my number's on the card. You call me, I come. Day or night. Understood?" Nell nodded. Driftwood came next. Brought books. A whole box of them. "You missed a lot of school," he said gently. "We'll get you caught up. No rush. But when you're ready, I know some good tutors." Flintlock brought a tablet, set it up with parental controls, educational apps, and one game Nell had mentioned liking before the accident. "Wi-Fi's already configured," he said, "and I put my number in the contacts. You ever need tech help, you text me." Chainsaw came last. He didn't bring anything physical, just knelt at Nell's eye level and said, "Your dad's a good man, one of the best I know. But if you ever need to talk to someone who isn't your dad, someone who'll listen and won't judge and won't push, you call me. I've got 2 daughters. I know how this works. Deal?" "Deal," Nell said quietly. He stood, shook Hawthorne's hand. "You did good, Tombstone. Real good." But this story isn't really about a funeral director who got caught, or a system that failed, or even 109 motorcycles descending on a Mississippi warehouse. It's about something bigger. It's about the moment when a child who'd been told he didn't matter decided that another child's life mattered more than his own safety. It's about a father who learned to look past paperwork and believe the unbelievable. It's about men society teaches you to fear becoming the only ones brave enough to answer when everyone else walked away. And it's about a system that works perfectly until the moment it doesn't. And what happens when ordinary people decide that perfect procedure matters less than a child's breath. 3 weeks after rescue, Hawthorne hadn't planned to be at the clubhouse on December 11th. He'd planned to be home with Nell, who was still recovering from the wrist surgery, still taking antibiotics for the pneumonia, still learning what it felt like to sleep in a bed that wasn't concrete. But Pitchfork had called, said there was something Hawthorne needed to see. When Hawthorne arrived, the main room was full. Not with brothers, with families. 17 people, ranging from a woman in her 70s to a teenage boy who looked uncomfortable in a button-down shirt that was clearly borrowed. "What's this?" Hawthorne asked. Pitchfork gestured to the group. "The other victims, the ones we found." It took Hawthorne 3 seconds to understand. Chainsaw stepped forward. FBI cross-referenced the death certificates with medical facility records, Social Security activity, utility payments. They found 4 of the 7, still alive. Eugenia Voss Halcourt, in a Baton Rouge nursing home under a false name. Eleanor Pritchard living with her daughter in Mobile after dying in 2019. Margaret Dean in a Gulfport apartment, working part-time at a library. Robert Talmadge in hospice care in Jackson, believing his family thought he was dead. They were all declared dead, Pitchfork added. Estate payouts all went to Randall Voss as executor, and they were all alive, hidden, warehoused, abandoned. The woman in her 70s stepped forward. Her hands shook. "You're the father," she said. "The one whose daughter—" "Yes, ma'am. I'm Eleanor Pritchard. I was told my son had died, that there was no one looking for me, that I was too much trouble. So they put me somewhere quiet and filed the papers, and I believed them. For 5 years, I believed them. Until the FBI showed up at my daughter's door and told her I wasn't dead." Her voice broke. "Your little girl got out because of you. Because you didn't stop looking. The rest of us got out because of what you did for her." Hawthorne didn't know what to say. The weight of it, 4 people who'd been buried alive in paperwork, 4 people who'd spent years believing they were forgotten, sat heavy in his chest. He looked at Pitchfork. What do they need? What Nell needed? Housing? Medical care? Someone who gives a damn. Hawthorne pulled out his phone, started making calls. Because this wasn't over when they found Nell. It was never going to be over. There would always be another victim, another child, another elder, another person the system filed away and forgot. But now, there were 109 Hell's Angels who knew what to look for. And they weren't looking away anymore. June 25th, Harlan County Courthouse, Room 3B. Nell sat in the witness box wearing a blue dress her father had bought her specifically for today. Her left wrist was out of the cast now. 8 weeks in plaster, followed by 12 weeks of physical therapy with a therapist named Ms. Chen, who never pushed too hard and always let Nell set the pace. She could close her hand fully now. 97% function. Dr. Okonkwo had been right. Okonkwo had. The prosecutor, a woman named Andrea Fells, who'd spent 6 hours preparing Nell for this moment, who'd promised she didn't have to answer anything she wasn't ready to answer, stood at the podium. "Nell, can you tell the court what you remember about October 9th?" Nell had been asked this question 40 times in the past 8 months, by doctors, by therapists, by FBI agents, by the victim advocate the court had assigned her, a gentleman named Mr. Reese, who brought coloring books to every session and never once pushed her to talk before she was ready. But this was different. This was the trial. This was Randall Voss sitting at the defense table in a suit that looked exactly like the one he'd worn to her mother's funeral, looking at her with an expression that was supposed to be remorseful, but mostly just looked annoyed. Nell took a breath, looked at the gallery. Her father was in the front row. Wade next to him. Pitchfork, chainsaw, sandstone, driftwood behind them. A wall of leather and patches and men who'd promised her that Randall Voss would never touch her again. She'd stopped counting the days since she left the warehouse on November 20th. She'd started counting different days. Days since the surgery. 243. Days since she'd started physical therapy. 201. Days since she'd returned to school. 178. Days since she'd stopped having nightmares every single night. 67. Days until this trial was over, and she could stop seeing Randall Voss's face. Hopefully just one more. "I remember the accident," Nell said. Her voice was steady. Ms. Fells had taught her, "You don't have to be loud. You just have to be clear. The other car hit us. My mom died right away. I knew because she stopped making noise. I was hurt. My wrist. It hurt really bad. And then a woman came. She put me in a van. She said she was taking me to the hospital." "Did she take you to the hospital?" "No. She took me to the warehouse. Mr. Voss was there. He told me my daddy thought I was dead. He showed me a picture of a gravestone with my name on it. He said if I made noise, he'd make sure my daddy never wanted to find me." "How long were you in the warehouse?" 49 days. "What happened during those 49 days?" Nell's hands tightened in her lap. "Wade came. He brought me food. He stayed with me so I wasn't alone. He told me he was going to find my daddy. And he did." Ms. Fells paused. "Nell, do you see the man who kept you in that warehouse in this courtroom today?" Nell looked directly at Randall Voss. He looked smaller than she remembered. Less scary. Just a man in a suit who'd made a choice to hurt people for money. "Yes, that's him." The trial lasted 3 more days. The jury deliberated for 91 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Randall Eugene Voss was sentenced to 34 years in federal prison with no parole eligibility for 22 years. By the time he was eligible for release, he'd be 71 years old. Sandra Oakes, arrested in Pensacola on November 20th, took a plea deal. Testified against Voss. Received 11 years. Judge Foster Greer was removed from the bench. Pending criminal investigation. His law license suspended. And Nell walked out of that courthouse holding her father's hand, knowing that the man who'd told her she didn't matter had just been told by 12 strangers that she mattered more than his freedom. 6 years after rescue. Wade Hollis was 17 years old. He'd aged out of the Harlan County group home 8 months prior, graduated high school with honors, been accepted to Mississippi State University on a full academic scholarship. Declared major. Social work. Concentration in child advocacy. But before he left for college in January, there was something he needed to do. The Harlan County Youth Services Office had contacted him 3 weeks ago. Asked if he'd be willing to speak with a child who'd reported abuse and wasn't being believed. A 10-year-old boy named Marcus, who'd told his teacher, his school counselor, and a police officer that his foster father was locking him in a closet overnight. All 3 adults had logged the report. None had followed up. Marcus had been labeled, the same word Wade knew intimately, a high-drama attention seeker. Wade agreed to meet him. They sat in a conference room at the Youth Services building on a gray November afternoon. Marcus was small for 10, wearing a hoodie that was too big. Marker drawings on his sneakers, stars and cars, and a superhero Wade didn't recognize. Wade looked at those shoes and felt something crack open in his chest. "Marcus," Wade said gently, "my name is Wade. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a social worker. I'm just someone who's been where you are." Marcus looked up. His eyes were guarded. The look of someone who'd learned that adults said they'd help, and then didn't. "You don't believe me either," Marcus said flatly. "I believe you," Wade said. "I believed you before you walked in this room, and I'm going to tell you why." He told Marcus his story. The warehouse. The 21 nights, the 3 adults who turned him away, the fabricator flag in his file, the moment he stood at Hawthorne Pruitt's shoulder at a cemetery and made one last choice to try. "Nobody believed me either," Wade said, "until I found someone who did. And that changed everything." Marcus was crying now, silent tears running down his face. "What do I do?" Marcus whispered. "I already told everyone. They didn't listen." Wade pulled out his phone, opened his contacts, found a name, turned the screen so Marcus could see it. Driftwood. Hell's Angels, Mississippi. Chapter. "This man," Wade said, "was the first person who listened to me like what I said mattered. He's a social worker now, specializes in cases exactly like yours. And I'm going to call him right now, with you sitting here, and you're going to tell him what you told me, and he's going to listen. And then he's going to do something about it. Okay?" Marcus nodded. Wade made the call. Put it on speaker. When Driftwood answered, Wade said, "It's Wade. I'm here with a boy named Marcus. He needs help, and he needs it now." "Tell me everything," Driftwood said. Marcus told him. Every detail. The closet, the lock on the outside, the hours in the dark, the adults who'd written it down and walked away. When Marcus finished, Driftwood said, "Marcus, I'm 40 minutes away. I'm getting in my car right now, and I'm not hanging up this phone until I'm standing in front of you. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Wade, you stay with him. I'm on my way." 47 minutes later, Driftwood walked through the youth services door, made eye contact with Marcus, knelt to eye level. "Let's go get you somewhere safe," Driftwood said. And Wade stood there, watching a 10-year-old boy with marker-covered sneakers realize that someone was finally, actually listening, and understood that this was why he'd survived the warehouse. Not just to save himself, to learn how to save the next one. Hawthorne stood at the cemetery gate on Sycamore Road. November 20th. 6 years to the day. He wasn't here to visit a grave. There was no body under that stone. There never had been. The marker had been removed 3 months after the trial. The plot left empty. A testament to a lie that had almost worked. He was here because this was where it started, where Wade planted his feet and spoke 8 impossible words, where everything changed. Nell was in college now, University of Southern Mississippi. Pre-med. She wanted to be a pediatrician, wanted to be the kind of doctor who listened when a child said something hurt, who believed them even when the adults in the room doubted, who understood that sometimes saving a life meant paying attention to the things everyone else had learned to ignore. She called Hawthorne every Sunday, sent him pictures of her dorm room, her study group, the anatomy textbook she'd covered in highlighter and determination. She was thriving. Wade was thriving. Eleanor Pritchard had reconnected with her son and was living in a small house in Mobile, baking pies for the church fundraiser every third Saturday. Marcus, the boy Wade had helped 6 years ago, had been removed from his foster home within 18 hours of Driftwood's intervention. Placed with a family who actually wanted him. Graduated high school last spring. Joined the Marines. 4 people who'd been declared dead by Randall Voss were alive, rebuilding, surrounded by families who'd been told to stop hoping. Hawthorne had a folder on his phone. Labeled, "The Ones We Kept." 43 messages from strangers. People whose sons or daughters or parents had come home because 109 Hell's Angels decided that paperwork mattered less than breath. He didn't keep the folder to feel proud. He kept it to remember why speed mattered, why listening mattered, why a child's voice, even when that child had been wrong before, even when that child had been labeled and dismissed and filed away, deserved to be heard as if their life depended on it, because sometimes it did. Here's the thing about systems. They're not designed to be cruel. They're designed to be careful, to require proof, to protect the innocent until guilt is established beyond doubt. But careful takes time. And sometimes the person trapped inside the system runs out of time before the gears finish turning. If you've ever been the person no one believed, the child who reported and was ignored, the adult who saw something wrong and was told to mind your business, the witness whose testimony was filed away and forgotten, I need you to hear this. You were not the problem. The system that didn't listen was the problem. And if you've ever been the person who walked away because intervening felt uncomfortable, because questioning authority felt inappropriate, because you told yourself someone else would handle it, I need you to hear this too. The next time a child plants their feet in front of you and asks for help, that moment is your test, not theirs, yours. You don't need 109 motorcycles to change a story. You just need to be the one person who stops walking. If this story moved you, subscribe to Valiant Bikers and share it. Comment below. Who was the person who finally listened when you needed them most? Or who do you wish had listened? Tell me your city. Tell me your story. And if you see a Wade or a Nell or a Marcus in your life, be their Hawthorne. Be their Driftwood. Be the voice that answers when everyone else has gone quiet. Because that laminated school photo Wade carried in his pocket for 21 days, the one with purple crayon letters that said Daddy's Girl, is sitting in a frame on Nell's dorm room desk right now. Not as a reminder of what was taken, as proof of what one child's refusal to give up can give back.